Tonight we welcome back Dan Ariely. He's been with us all this week and will be here again tomorrow night as well. Dan, last night we discussed how human irrationality has shaped our understanding of healthcare. Tonight we turn a lens to the education system, and I want to begin by asking you, would a clearer understanding of human behavior improve our approach to education?
So first of all, I think that understanding human motivation is important for everything, and of course for education. Think about it. You get kids who have completely other interests than sitting in a classroom and studying. Understandably so, right? This is not the most appealing activity. And what we want to do is we want to get them to do something that is not in their nature and love at that particular age. And not only that, but we want them to develop love for learning for the rest of their lives. And our understanding of what motivates kids is incredibly important for that. And then, of course, there's the second side, which is you have teachers who are not necessarily having the most fun of their lives taking care of kids for that many hours of the day in relatively harsh condition. We ask ourselves what would motivate them to work. So it's really a system of two types of motivations, and we need to understand each of them in order to create something that is actually useful. And I think we're very far from finding something that is actually useful.
I want to read a bit, an excerpt from your first book, Predictably Irrational, as it pertains to the education system. Here's what part of what you wrote said. We should probably rethink school curricula and link them in more obvious ways to social goals, things like the elimination of poverty and crime, technological goals, boosting energy conservation, space exploration, and medical goals that we care about as a society. This way, the students, teachers, and parents might see the larger point in education and become more enthusiastic and motivated about it. Dan, I'm wondering, though, we have programs in the U.S., where you are, and here in Canada, that celebrate innovation and social goals, things like the Mars Center in medicine and MIT as it pertains to technology. So why do you believe that education is not aligned with social goals?
Well, I think that some education in some places is, but I think to a large degree it is not. Most people are studying things in a way that is completely decontextualized and looks, frankly, very non-relevant. So let me give you kind of some examples from my second book about what gets people to be motivated. And it turns out that the moment people think an idea is their idea, they start liking it more. So here's a study we did with readers of the New York Times. We gave the New York Times 6 problems in the world. How do you help with water, energy, pollution, all kinds of problems. And we asked them to come up with solutions. But the way we asked them to come up with a solution is we gave them a list of 50 words, and we say, please use only these words to come up with a solution. Now, in reality, we put words in there, and we put synonyms in there, so we knew what solution that they would come up with. But people had the feeling that they came up with a solution. And then we compare it to a situation in which people were just given the problem, how to save water, energy, pollution, and they were given the solution. How will those two groups differ from each other? Turns out the people who thought that they came up with a solution because they rearranged those words to come up with it, thought the idea is much better, more important, more useful. They would spend more time on it, more energy. They will be willing to volunteer to a large degree. And that, I think, is one of the secrets. The moment you think something is yours, you start liking it more. Now, most of the education we do is rote learning. Think about even something like a lab in chemistry or physics. We give students a recipe of what to do, and we say, put 2 drops of that and 1 drop of that and see what happens. They know somebody has done it before. They know that they're being judged on replicating the same pattern to as precise as possible. There's no room, there's no celebration of making it their own idea and their own innovation. Now, think about what would happen if instead of doing it, let's say, in a chemistry lab, you did it in a social science lab, and you told people, here is one experiment, and here is how the results look like. Now, how do you think it would be different if you did something else? Come up with new ways to test it, come up with different interventions, different groups. And some people might say, well, I think men and women will be different. And they would test it, and they'll probably find out that men and women are not that different. But whatever they do, it will become their idea and their initiative. And I think that's one of the things we really don't do for students. We just give them a recipe of what they need to learn. Now, the same thing happens for teachers. In the US, we have this terrible program called the No Child Left Behind, which is basically, it's not named correctly. It's mostly no child is moving forward. That's the real issue. And what we're doing is we're telling teachers an exact recipe of what they're supposed to teach. They have no flexibility, they have no autonomy, they can't change anything. And we say, here is the recipe of what you need to teach, and that's the material for every hour of every class that you're going to teach. And now the teachers have no flexibility. Nothing is their own idea, nothing is their own personality. They're basically parrots repeating the material, you know, with slight deviation and slight different accents, but that's about it. And this way we're killing, I think, the education system on both sides.
I want to talk to you about another place in the education system, and that is procrastination, because that's what a lot of your research in education is about. What have your experiences been like with your students?
So procrastination is really interesting, right? Because every semester starts with the students swearing to themselves that they're going to be great. And they buy new notebooks, and they have, you know, new pens and coloring and highlighting pens, and everybody is ready. And it really kind of lasts for a few weeks. And then their enthusiasm drops, and, you know, basketball and all kinds of other things take over. And toward the end of the semester, there's all kinds of, you know, family relatives are dying, and people are getting really sick, and people have all kinds of reasons why they need an extension or more time, and they can't do something. It's really interesting how you look at the distribution of death of people in society as a function of where the semester is. You'll find out toward the end of the semester, a lot of people are dying. It's a really dangerous time of the year. But anyway, the question is why this is happening, because it happens over and over, and what can we do about it? So one year I did the following experiment. I told the students at the beginning of the semester, I said, look, you have 3 papers that you owe me at the end of this term, and you can do anything you want. You can decide when you want to submit each of those. You can submit them in the last day of the semester, you could space them, you could submit them early, whatever you want. Now, I said that if you submit them earlier than what you committed, fine, no problem. If you submit them after you committed to it, you're going to get a penalty. So a student that wants to minimize the penalty would say, I'll submit everything in the last day of the semester, or at least I'll say so, and if I can submit early, I'll do that. But they would not commit to submitting anything earlier. What actually happened is that people committed to submitting things early, and by doing so, they actually got better grades. Why? Because the people who delayed it for the last minute, even if they thought to themselves, oh, I'll do it early, did not do it early. They started working on it 48 hours before it was due. It was not enough time. They basically didn't sleep. Their productivity was very low, and they produced something at a very low quality. And the people who spaced the deadlines basically forced themselves into start acting 24 hours or 48 hours before each of the paper was due. They spaced it out. They had more time, and they got better performance out of it. Now, the most curious thing is that for the last few years, I give the student in my class a paper describing these results. So they all know it. They all know they have a problem with procrastination. They all know about pre-committing. They know that pre-committing with a penalty is actually potentially very effective. Nobody ever come back and say, Professor Ariely, would you mind forcing us to commit to early deadlines? What is really interesting is that people have self-control problems. We realize we have self-control problems, like in procrastination. But if somebody doesn't offer us a tool on a silver platter, we don't use it. What we really need is somebody to offer us this tool and say, hey, would you like to use that? So think about something like Ulysses and the Sirens. Ulysses knew that if the sirens will sing, he will be tempted. So what did he do? He asked the sailors to tie him to the mast. He asked the sailors to put donag in their ears, and this way they sailed through. And he also told them, don't release me no matter what I say. Now, Ulysses was really kind of smart because he understood his self-control problem, and he did something about it. Most people do understand self-control problem. They just don't take the extra step of doing something about it. But the moment we give them a chance to do something about it, many people are taking it. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So imagine that you came to a restaurant, and the waiter told you as you came in that if you allow him to increase your bill by $1, he would not show you the dessert tray. Right? Now you get to think, hey, for $1, would I like to somebody not to show me the dessert tray, and therefore for me not to succumb to temptation? Or you can think, would you come up with this idea by yourself? Well, turns out lots of people are willing to do it if somebody's offering. We're not as likely to do it by ourselves. So here's another example. We approached a big sample of people, and we asked them about taking a potential risk for medical treatment. So it turns out that no man in the history of the world has ever woken up and said, today I feel like colonoscopy. So imagine what happens to people who have colonoscopy scheduled. They are very busy that day. They have an important meeting, they can't go, they delay, they don't show up. So we asked people, we said, look, when we schedule for your colonoscopy for 3 months from now, would you be willing to give us a check for $500? If you show up on time, you'll get the money. If you don't show up on time, you lose the money. Now, this is a proposition with a negative expected value. You can't get better. You can only lose money. But more than 50% of the people are willing to take it. Why? Because they said to themselves, when I wake up on November 12th, I will not feel like colonoscopy. And I will make all kinds of excuses not to go. However, if I give up $500 and I have a chance to lose that $500, now I might go. Not because I care about colonoscopy today, because I don't want to lose the money. And this is about self-control. And again, when you give people this offer, often people take it. But very few people ever go to the doctor and say, you know what, you just scheduled for me, let me write you a check. And if I don't show up for the exam on time, you can deposit it. So I think the trick is to really help people recognize their self-control problem and give them solutions that are easily implementable.
Okay, Dan, we're running out of time, but I want to ask you about one more aspect of the education system, and that's about standardized testing. We use it everywhere, sort of as a primary way to monitor educational performance and show students' strengths and weaknesses. The estimates here in Ontario for testing vary from $50 to $59 million each year. So is spending on standardized testing a rational decision to improve our education system?
So I think testing in general, I mean, there's a question of how expensive it is, but let's say it was free. Let's say it was free and you can still ask whether you want to test. I think testing is perfectly fine. It's good to have a statement of where you are. The problem is that people are teaching to the test. And tests are basically imperfect devices. And when you teach to the test, you're basically teaching to the wrong criteria. So the results, again, from the US, not from Canada, is that if you take two equivalent tests of knowledge, what you show is the No Child Left Behind policy is getting higher score on the particular version of test that they are using, but it doesn't show any increase on alternative tests, which basically means that what people do is they teach to the test. If I'm a teacher and I have 40 kids and I know what the test is or what the type of the questions, I'm not going to teach the big concepts. I'm going to teach how to get good scores on that test, and that's actually going to eliminate education. So I think that even if testing was absolutely free, it would be not clear to me that this is the right thing to do. On top of that, now when you talk about the expense, the question is, what is the value of doing all this testing? What do we actually do with the information that is actually so important? And how much could we take, whatever this amount is, $50 million, and say, let's do the testing randomly in one place every 3 to 5 years, but not do it systematically. People would still have to teach because there will be a random test, but all the money we would save, we could put back into the education system. Not clear to me that the right way to spend money is to do all this extreme testing.
Okay, Dan Ariely, we'll have to leave it there for tonight. We'll talk to you again tomorrow in the final part of our conversation about irrationality, and that's when we'll explore crime and the justice system. Thanks again.
My pleasure.